copy, but when you open it up to the front page and look at the distributor, it's FAO Schwartz in New York. So that, so these were sent out to toy stores and other places.
Now this one says made in Germany.
Yes.
And it doesn't have a publisher's name, but it has TB.
Yeah. Don't know.
So I don't know either. And when I was trying to look it up, I couldn't find what that was either. Yeah. But anyway, it's a lot of fun.
Oh, it's terrific. It's the kind of book that I'm going to be talking about today.
Okay. Well, I knew when I saw that you were going to be talking about early pop-ups, that this was kind of the,
absolutely.
Right there
I sort of bunched together pop-ups and movable books and novelty books of various kinds. It was just an intriguing time for children's publishing, right on the cusp of the Industrial Revolution, when people were trying to figure out all of these nifty gizmos that could activate books for children and make them more interesting. So yeah,
I really like that it's not glued down, because you can see, actually it's not glued down top or bottom, but it's not glued down there, and then it's not glued down on the back side either.
Wow. That's pretty, I'm glad that it stayed, that it didn't, go any further than that. It's it is remarkable to be able to see the mechanisms that actually cause these sounds. It's no electronic sound chips there. It's all paper bellows and wires that are making these sounds, and it's just extraordinary. It really is.
Well, I'm glad to know that.
During the presentation, actually, I'll talk about that. I think I have a photograph of what those bellows look like. But if you want to hang on to the book, and maybe after my bit is done, we can actually go over to you and you can show exactly.
Okay, great.
Because that would be great.
Good.
Okay.
You learn something every day on Rare Book Cafe.
Yeah.
So what else has been happening to you, happening for you guys in the book world?
I bought a copy of Mary Randolph's Virginia Housewife this week. I like old cookbooks a lot, and of course, and it's been rebound, but it's a nice copy, and it's the kind of book that I have trouble parting with. I like to keep those old cookbooks. I
think that's a malady that book dealers all over deal with, is books that they really would like to just keep around.
Right. And it's one of those, I'm afraid. Also, I have had over the years a lot of advertising material from Norman Studios, in Jacksonville, that did, totally black cast films, and found another one on the virtual book fair week before last that came this week. That was a movie I had not heard of, called Zircon. So I think I have a buyer in mind for it already, but those are just really, really interesting. All that stuff from Norman Studios. Let me think if I've done anything else. Did send David Hess something else from Inside a Book, one that I talked about last week with the hair dry shampoo in it.
As a matter of fact, he mentions that not in today's episode, but in a future episode.
Future one. Yeah.
I think probably it's coming up next week, but he was very appreciative.
And I did need to tell you that I will not be here on the 10th of July. I'm going to visit friends in Arkansas for a few days. Sorry,
wonderful.
But I hope to go by the Vamp and Tramp in Birmingham to look at some of Gabby's findings, if they have any in stock.
Oh, wonderful! That's right. That's the store
that in Birmingham that carries hers, that she said.
Oh, great.
So they're only open by appointment. I've got to call and see, but I'm going to spend the night with my brother on the way out. So I'm hoping to have a report on that when I get back.
Lee, it's been a long time. It's been a long time since any of us have been able to say, "I'm taking a trip to visit."
And, I know. This is some college friends who moved from Atlanta to Conway because their daughter and her family lived there when they retired, and we have frequent Zoom cocktail meetings.
Yes.
And I've been looking forward for a year now to going out to see them. So I've got that planned. So
that's great.
I'm excited about it.
You should be.
Yeah.
That's a good sign, I think. That's a good sign that things are starting to get back to normal, and that there are a lot of people who are making plans to travel. In fact, my neighbors have headed off to they just sent me pictures from the Badlands. They have, and I think they're in Montana now. And so how exciting. What a great time to be able to do that and start to do it safely.
Yeah.
It seems so exciting. A 4-day trip that would not have seemed like anything 2 years ago now seems like a world voyage,
We have just spent the last couple of days, my wife and I were sitting down, and the Movable Book Society is actually having an in-person conference in Denver in late September, early October. And I thought I was going to do it alone until my wife sat down and said, "Hey, if you're going out to Denver, why don't you go out 10 days before the conference?"
Oh, wow.
And we're going to do all 4 national parks in Colorado prior to the conference.
Oh,
and then she'll leave and I'll do the conference. She doesn't care about that. Yeah. But it's the first, same thing. It's the first real trip we've been thinking about in a long
Well, I took the grandchildren to Asheville in the Biltmore House 2 weeks ago. And that was a lot of fun. They behaved well. We enjoyed the trip. And
so there may be another one in the offing since they did behaved well.
Probably in the fall. Probably a leaf trip in the fall. Oh, they're staying busy this summer with, as things have opened up. Organizations, the schools, the arts center, the recreation department have gone back to doing their summer workshops and camps and things, and so they've stayed busy with sport things and are about to participate in the theater camp at the Arts Center. They're 6 and 8, so this ought to be really. They're doing Aladdin Junior, so this ought to really be good.
Should be
fun.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like it's 12:30 Eastern time, and I forget what the other times are. 9:30 out in the Pacific world. And 5:30 Greenwich Mean Time, and that means that it's time for the Rare Book Cafe, the book lovers' rendezvous, where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free. We're here every Saturday from 12:30 Eastern to 2 o'clock Eastern. We're live streaming on YouTube and Facebook, and now we're also on a podcast. So you can find that on podcast platforms, wherever podcast platforms live. We're a virtual cafe accessible anywhere in the world, and everyone is welcome. We're here for the love of books. I'm Alan Smith, and I am pinch hitting here for Ed Markowitz, who is usually sitting here in this spot. Well, not in this spot because this is a virtual, I guess, spot. But anyway, you get the idea. With me today are Lee Lynn from the Ridge Books in Calhoun, Calhoun, Georgia.
Let's get that right.
Calhoun, Georgia. And Larry Rakow from the Wonderland Books in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. And welcome to both of you, and we're looking forward to talking with you during the program. But before we start, I should mention that while we are a live program, some of our content is pre-recorded. And we mention this because on some platforms where we live, there apparently were issues in the past because people thought we were trying to fool someone and when we had pre-recorded segments. Well, we don't. We're not trying to fool anyone. We do have pre-recorded segments. For instance, David Hess will be along a little later. He's with the Bookman in Orange, California, and he will be along with his popular feature, Things Found in Old Books. Lynn Thompson of Henry Bemis Books in Chester, South Carolina, will be along later with another episode of The Story Behind the Story. And later on, live, Gigi Best will visit with us and report on the unprecedented turnout for her Juneteenth celebration last week. But now we're going to move on to Larry, who has some, as you can see in the title card to my left, is talking about 19th century pop-up books. How fun, 19th century pop-up books. They really are.
Yeah. The whole idea of 19th century pop-up books just tickles me. I mean, the idea that anyone would collect something that was intrinsically delicate paper, complex mechanisms that are then given to children to play with, and trying to find examples of them that are collectible 150 years later. It seems like an absolutely fruitless occupation, but it's something that I've pursued somewhere along the line, and have been relatively successful as putting together, as my British friends say, a modest collection of 19th century pop-ups. You know, it was interesting. We were talking with Lee just before things got started, and she mentioned that she had found a book that she really, really liked, but it was going to be hard to part with. And as a dealer, I think this is something that many of us go through. I mean, Wonderland Books, my own shop just carries children's books. That's it. And it was difficult at the very beginning to decide that I was going to sequester just a certain kind of book and keep it for myself. I mean, I've always been a collector. Before I was a dealer, I was a collector. And, starting with Davy Crockett cards back in the 1950s. And the idea of collecting has always fit a certain need in my life. And so I sat down one day and decided that for Wonderland Books, we would deal with every single kind of collectible children's book out there, except for pop-ups, and particularly older pop-ups from the 19th century and the early 20th century, which comprise the bulk of my own collection. Some people ask how I got started on all of this, and it really came about. I was at that point, I was an administrator for a large public library system, dealing with children's books. It was one of the great jobs I have ever had. I would wake up in the morning, go into the office, and there would be a new stack of children's books on my desk. And my entire job was sitting down, reading the children's books, reviewing them, and talking them to other people about. So it was a great job. Anyway, this book came along, Jan Pienkowski's Haunted House. And at this point, my own kids were 3 and 5 years old. And I looked inside this and I thought, whoa, what a remarkable, fun book this is. You know, it's just filled with things that move and shapes that, oh my goodness. Oh my God. And I thought, well, I'm going to buy this book for my kids. And I did. I got a copy and I brought it home, and they loved it. They loved it to death within a week. Within a week, it was torn apart and the pieces were all over the house. And they just thought it was the greatest book ever. And it made me think, how far back do these things go? And have any of them survived? And that would have been in the mid-70s. And thankfully, it was a time when some of these were accessible. Children's book collecting was not as popular at that point as it is now. And certainly movable and pop-up and novelty books were not at the top of the collectible bunch. And I was able to acquire some interesting things along the line. So I thought what I would do today is put together, I can play with the haunted house and hold it up and play with it like this, but I'm not going to do that for a lot of the books in my collection. So what I thought I'd do is put together essentially a PowerPoint, and I'll talk over it. I'll show you 10 books that I think are worth sharing with you today. I started out by thinking about what are my 10 favorites, and then realized I don't have 10 favorites. I have, 150 favorites, but I'm not going to bore you with those. So, Alan, I am really glad you're here today, because I know we tried this out yesterday and it worked just fine. But if I need to be, I'm not the highest tech guy in the world. If we need to be talked through, I'm glad you're there. I'm going to attempt to share my screen.
I see it now.
Yeah, I'm going to
see anything share. Yet. We have to give it a moment.
Okay.
To connect.
What happens? You tell me when you can see the title.
Unfortunately, I am not seeing it yet.
Mm-hmm.
But while we're waiting for it to connect, I just want to acknowledge a couple of our viewers. Warren in New Orleans. Hi, Warren. Thank you for joining us. Raven in Orlando. Thank you for joining us. And I'll take this opportunity to suggest to people who are watching that we love for you to make comments, and we love for you to so type in comments in the on whatever platform you're on. Type in comments below, and we will select from them to post some of them and ask questions. If you have questions, by all means, ask questions. I'm going to bring this in. I don't see the image yet, but I'm going to give it the opportunity to be there and see. Do you see an image there yet? And Chris Brown was, there you go. You're there. Yes.
Okay, let me go and take it to the next step.
Well, while you're navigating to that, I'm going to also acknowledge Chris Brown, who was our guest last week, and he says he's just loving the children's books. Chris, we enjoyed having you on last week, and we hope you will join us again. But thank you for tuning in as a guest.
Okay. Alan, do we have the 10 favorite 19th century pop-ups being shared?
That's what I see.
Good. Lee, can you see that as well?
I can see it, yes.
Okay, well then let us begin. I thought that we'd start at the very beginning. And the fact is, this goes back a ways. Cinderella is one of Dean's new scenic pop-up books. There were a series, actually, I believe, of 4 pop-up books that the company Dean and Son in London produced in the 1850s. And these are generally considered the very first pop-up books made for children. There were others in the series. I think the very first one was Little Red Riding Hood. I know that Robinson Crusoe was one of them, and there was a 4th as well. But of these, it's really a very, very simple pop-up. It's a 3-tier pop-up that is activated in the simplest way possible. There's a little string, a silken string on the back, and when you pull it, you get a pop-up picture. I think there were 6 of these in each one of the books. And again, the very fact that something like this has managed to exist since 1850 is sort of incredible. But pop-up books came in any number of different formats. And when I talk about pop-up books, I think I mentioned this to Lee earlier on, what I'm really talking about are classic pop-up books, the kind that we have today, movable books, which we also have, and also novelty books, books that have been put together in ways that people never really expected. And this is one of them, again, from Dean and Son in London. Dean's new dress book, Rose Merton, the Little Orphan Girl. And what's incredible about this, again, about 1860 or so, is that in each one of the illustrations, Rose is dressed in real fabric. And we can see this the very first plate actually also has a movable piece. There's a little tab down below, and the woman is holding a balloon that rotates when you pull the tab. And each one of those illustrations is actually clothed in real fabric. You can see here. And as Rose moves from poverty to elegance, her costumes get more and more and more elaborate and made out of finer and finer fabric.
That is so cool.
You know, I love the fact that there was such a reliance on books during this period for children on fairy tales and nursery rhymes. It seems to have been, you know, the heart of children's publishing at that point, which is sort of understandable given the Victorian period. But something like this, Behind the Curtain in Fairyland, comes from another publisher. This is actually Raphael Tuck of London in 1895. And I love panorama formats. That is, books that fold out and out and out and out. And this is one of them. It looks sort of innocuous when you just sort of see it originally, but it just folds. And then each one of those folds down and presents a picture from a nursery rhyme. The one in the middle is Sleep in the Treetops. This one here is her missing her lambs, Little Bo Peep, and each one of those opens up an unusual format. And talking of unusual formats, this is one of the most, I always hate to use the word unique when we're talking about books, but in point of fact, this comes darn close to it. There was a second one called Come and Go in Fairyland, again, relating back to fairy stories and nursery rhymes, but this one is just a general book called Come and Go. This was produced by Ernst Nister in London, one of the great producers of novelty pop-up books for children, distributed in the United States by E.P. Dutton, a company that still exists. But Nister and Dutton had this arrangement to go and both create and distribute pop-up and novelty books in England and the United States. And you can see those silken threads, those red cords that are coming out. Those play an integral part in the mechanism. They are fully visible in the book. And we'll give it a go and see how it goes. Come and Go. And there are those eyes. You have to watch closely. They motored off all full of glee upon that summer day, and you just pull one, and there they go. You can see in a modern car, and you take the same tie on the other side, pull it back, but they came home, as you will see, in quite another way. And there's the horse drawing the carriage. And it is the same cord that goes back and forth between the two.
How do they do that?
That's an excellent question. And this, I think, actually are the only original chords that I still have. The boatman rowed his empty boat across the sunlit bay, but pull, you'll see the cargo suite that he brought back that day. Completely different. Just an amazing book for children. You know, it is so unusual. When I talked about the Victorian pop-ups and 19th century pop-ups, we're gonna take just a little bit, widening the category just a tiny bit here. But it is such an unusual book, and really a very rare book, that I thought we'd include this as well. You know, to have a contemporary personage in a children's book like this is really extraordinary. Following Roosevelt's presidency, he was sent by the Museum of Natural History, the United States Museum of Natural History, to Canada to gather unknown forms of flora and fauna. And this is really where the whole teddy bear came from and all of that sort of stuff. And although the vast majority of what Roosevelt returned with, and it was significant, I mean, it was a major contribution, most of it was plants and insects and small little ingenious things. But Roosevelt, being Roosevelt, he went and made up all of these stories about the wild beasts in Africa and all of the amazing adventures that he had had. And this sort of thing wound up in a movable book by Salfield. Salfield is just down the road from us. We're in Cleveland Heights. Salfield was in Akron, Ohio. And they did publish a number of interesting pop-up books. But this one is just incredible because of the how it adds to Roosevelt's legend as a He-Man. Here we have him in the middle of the jungle eating with tigers and being served by monkeys. Yes. If Roosevelt needed a shave, a monkey barber would come and give him a shave. And of course, he didn't travel by horse there. No, not Teddy Roosevelt. He traveled by rhinoceros. So you have these amazing things, adding to Roosevelt's legend as a man of the world. And then talking further about unique ways to go and animate books. This was one of a series of 4 books that, again, Dean & Son, our friends in London, created. These are in about 1885, maybe 1890. And one of the interesting things about it is that it gives instructions. It says, before opening each page, place thumbs where marked, hold firmly and open wide. And the mechanism that is used is a series of almost invisible threads, teeny tiny, slim little threads. And when you hold your thumbs down on the side of each page, it allows them to be taut. And when they tauten up, they go and cause pieces to rise up. You'll see. You can see the thumb marks on either side. You put your thumbs there and hold it down. This first one doesn't show as well as some of the others, but it allows pieces to go and rise up and create a 3-dimensional effect. It's even better on this one. There's the lighthouse there. You'll see that it actually becomes curved when you do that. And in the last plate, there's the sails will billow when you creating a neat 3-dimensional effect. You can almost see in the center there the little threads that are causing the animation. And this is something that Lee should be familiar with. This is a book that I believe she came across not too long ago. And we were talking about it just before the program began today. Bilderbuch mit Tierstimmen, I believe. I don't speak German, but essentially it means a picture book with sound, a speaking picture book. This was one of the most popular 19th century novelty books and is really a predecessor for all of those children's books today that use sound chips, except this one did not use sound chips the way that we know. This one, oh, I'm so sorry. There we go. This one, you can see, this one was distributed by FAO Schwartz in New York, although published in Germany. There are these little ivory pulls on the side. A little arrow shows you. And there's the goat. In this book, I think there are 6 different ones. Here are some birds. This I love. The cuckoo is just remarkable. Here, there's that arrow. Let's pull it. Pretty good. I think we have one more to go and demonstrate. Oh, yeah, let's do the birds. Why not? Here we go. So an incredible sound book for children. And a lot of people, of course, have asked me over the years, well, where did those sounds come from? And I know that Lee has a copy. Maybe afterwards she can share it with us. But this essentially is what it looks like on the inside. You can see all the poles over there on the right. They are all attached to lines, and each line is attached to a paper bellows. Remember, this is, 150 years old now, to paper bellows that go and create those noises and sounds. It's really just a remarkable bit of Victorian engineering. Wonderful piece.
Oh,
you know, we have a couple to go and finish up with, and I didn't want to end without mentioning a name that some folks out there might be familiar with, Lothar Meggendorfer. Meggendorfer was German, Bavarian, I believe, and spent his entire life making people smile. And there are many photographs. I particularly like this one. I think it really captures his essence. He was born in 1847, just 100 years before me, and died in 1929. And he produced a series of absolutely remarkable novelty pop-up books for children. And I thought we'd demonstrate some of them here today. This is something that folks might be familiar with because it has been published and republished over the years. In point of fact, if you went out to a bookstore today and took a look in the pop-up or novelty section, you could probably find a modern reprint of this, The Doll's House by Lothar Meggendorfer. This is a first edition, though, at least a first edition in English, and goes back to the 1880s, early 1890s. And when you take a look on the back, it shows exactly how it should be done. There's the girl holding it in the upper portion. And then down on the screen, we have it all laid out. Again, a panorama book that unfolds and unfolds and unfolds to create several different realistic rooms. The copy that I have, thankfully, actually comes in the original slip case that it came in. Nice piece. And then, just to give you an idea, it unfolds and unfolds like that. We won't do the entire thing. I've unfolded it here, and we can take a look at some of the pop-up designs that occur when you unfold the entire doll's house. And put special notice of that one on the left. That's a peddler with his cart coming to a window. We'll see more about that later on. But here's the interior of a store. This is a wonderful parlor scene with a boy playing a piano, a kitchen, and an outdoor scene feeding the chickens. And just remember, all of this can be folded up entirely into a single book. Here, the peddler is actually looking through a glassine window into the next scene, which is really cool. You can actually look through the window and get a sense of what's going on next door. And here's the kitchen scene. And the store. I love this one with the piano. There's actually another piece that I didn't fold down on top of the piano, but that works as well. And you remember that peddler in the modern reproductions, and actually in the Meggendorfer book itself, as it proved popular and popular and popular and was sold well into the 1910s, 1915, 1920, they removed that peddler in the front scene and replaced it. Instead of the wagon, there's now an early automobile and a bicyclist, and the woman is coming out to go and serve her visitors. So that's one way you can tell whether it's an early iteration of the Doll's House or a later one. This is one of the more typical Meggendorfer movables. Princess Rosebud, I believe, is the way that it's done. And it is a beautiful book. This one I particularly love in my collection because it is of such exquisite quality. This, again, is a book from about 1885. The copy that I have from 1885 still has the original dust jacket on it, which makes me happy. And Meggendorfer was an anatomist. He really studied human movement and knew the way that things and people move. And so these tab-pulled activations actually mimic human movement in a way that would be difficult to duplicate now. I love the delicacy of this and the dance that she does. Or the incredible complexity of something like this last plate. And all of these, of course, are activated by these intricate paper mechanisms that exist on the back of the plate. Really kind of incredible. Wow. And then I wanted to end with a book that is probably the rarest in my collection, which I feel very fortunate to have acquired. It's again by Meggendorfer, and the translation from the German is a shadow book, and it is really unique amongst the books that I have. You'll see that when you open it, there's some text, and then a mechanism, like so, and it's really a silhouette mechanism, pretty straight. What you don't realize is that the black and white portion of that illustration is printed on translucent paper. And the idea is to first place a bright light where the white paper is, the one that's closest to us now. Just place a bright light there, shine it at that mechanism, and view it from the other side. And it produces these incredible silhouettes throughout the book. It really is kind of incredible. So if anyone watching or listening wants to know more about any of these things, I think one of the best places to go is the Movable Book Society. You can simply Google that. It comes up. It is a remarkable organization of several hundred, a good number of hundred people, some of whom are collectors, some of whom are paper engineers creating contemporary pop-ups, some of whom are children's book historians. And we get together once every couple of years, actually in late September, early October this year. There's going to be a conference in Denver that is going to be, as I think many conferences will be for the foreseeable future, a combination of both folks who want to be there in person and a virtual conference. And it has been my experience that these conferences are absolutely remarkably wonderful for folks who attend in either way. But to become a member of the Movable Book Society, if you have an interest in movable or pop-up or novelty books, and to attend this sort of conference is really a great thing. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Let's see if I can do that. And we're back again.
And those children who grew up.
And we're back. That's just incredible. That's just wonderful. I want to do a couple of things, Larry. I want to invite people in our audience who would like to ask questions to do so. Just type them in, and we'll address them. The other thing that I wanted to do is ask a question myself.
Go ahead.
It strikes me that these books are labor intensive from a production standpoint. They must have been labor intensive. What kind of press runs did they have, and what was involved in putting those things together?
Yeah. In answer to the question, Alan, I'd be hesitant to name a particular press run for any of these, but the general answer is much, much fewer than a run of a typical book. And nothing much has changed. Nothing much has changed. I mean, we are thankfully, the story of pop-up and movable books sort of follows a sine curve. There are periods in which there is incredible inventive production of these, and then it's a sort of fallow period when not much is going on, and then somebody will come along, a real innovator, who will take it to another high point, and then it sort of falls off again. But we are living now in a wonderful golden age of pop-ups and pop-up production. We're very fortunate, although that may be coming to an end for the exact reason that you mentioned. These are all incredibly labor intensive, and the most recent period of pop-up production that has produced folks like David Carter and Matthew Reinhardt and Robert Sabuda and others. That all came about because publishers found places to go and produce these at minimal cost. I know that they were done in Colombia, they were done in Central America, they were done in Southeast Asia, they were done in Thailand, but and almost exclusively by women, I should mention as well, for the actual putting together of these books. At prices that publishers could then charge a reasonable amount, $18 or $24 or $28 for some of these complex modern pop-up books. But as workers have engaged with each other, as prices have gone up, it has become more and more difficult for publishers to find places in which to produce these books. And there is talk now that, this wonderful age of pop-ups that we have enjoyed for a while now, it may well be coming to an end, which is a great news for those folks whose salary is being raised and whose standard of living is going up, and not so great for pop-up book collectors.
Well, it strikes me that the technology certainly certainly has changed in modern times. You have it in greeting cards as well as where you have recordings. You press a button and you have a recording, and so those kinds of things have changed. But it strikes me that many of the books that are produced with the old technology or with that they must have just been incredibly labor intensive, and the intricacy of these things is just incredible. The way they have figured out the details of how one of those things is to work.
There are you take a look at somebody, I'll just point to Lothar Meggendorfer again, who produced scads of these, and each one is just absolutely incredible. But it's hard not to throw around the word genius when you're looking at these. I mean, he understood something that nobody else in his time understood, and did it better, by so many degrees better than anybody else who was doing it, that he was, that's the reason that he is recognized today. Every 2 years, the Movable Book Society selects one remarkable contemporary pop-up book and awards it the Meggendorfer Prize, named after him. But yes, it's there have been innovations over time. I mean, some contemporary pop-ups do employ things like sound chips, and of course all the individual elements are die cut rather than hand cut. And I mean, time marches on and things get somewhat easier. But in point of fact, some of the pop-ups that are being created today are even more intricate than anything ever imagined in the 19th century. There's a book, let me see if I think that, yeah. This book goes back to 1999, so we're really talking about what, 20 years ago. Called the Elements of Pop-Up, and by David Carter and James Diaz. And it's a simple book. Every single page has an example, doing this backwards, of a certain kind of pop-up, and tells you exactly how to make it. But these are relatively simple pop-ups, the basic pop-ups that are used in contemporary pop-up books. And just recently, something really interesting happened. There was a Kickstarter campaign for a new book by Carter and Diaz that took it to the next level. And it's much, much more intricate pop-ups that have been developed over the last 20 years. And I think they had been hoping to raise, what, $5,000 through Kickstarter? I mean, I'm trying to remember what it was. And they wound up doing, like, I'm making this up, like $35,000 were raised in order to get this new book published. There is such interest amongst both professional paper engineers and hobbyists who love working with pop-up materials that this book it had no problem at all getting funded through Kickstarter, and it's coming out in a couple of months now.
We've run over our time a little bit, but I know Lee had a book that we were talking about earlier, and I just wanted to give her a chance to, if she wants to show it, to put it up here, and we'll do that. And we're going to switch things around a little bit and go to Gigi next instead of a video. But anyway, go ahead, Lee.
Okay, this is that same speaking picture book that Larry showed, but in a larger format and in English. And it has 9 different scenes with pull strings. It's not in great shape, but it does still work. Not all of them sound really good. This is a cock. Let me see if I can get his little thing. You hear him? And you can see in it the bellows because the back is not fastened down, so you can get a good view of the mechanism in it. It also includes, the last 2 pages are Mama and Papa, and they don't come across very clearly, but that's a different, a different variation of just the animal sounds. At the very end, we have Mama and Papa, and let's see if I can make them work. Well, that's supposed to be one of them, but I don't think that works too well. But I did also, whoops, what have I got here? I did also want to say that all those children who grew up enjoying pop-up books, like my children did, and now my grandchildren are, still like them when they grow up, like Larry. My grandchildren gave their father, for Father's Day this year, a Harry Potter pop-up, a modern one. And I recently sold one of Robert Sabuta's limited edition of not Alice in Wonderland, of The Wizard of Oz, and it was amazing. Not only did each page have this elaborate scene, but each page also has 3 or 4 little additional ones that you unfold and that pop up. It just, and what you want to say is, how do they do that? How do they do that? But they're great. We just love them.
Okay. Alan, I do have something going on, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave early today. But thank you so much for the opportunity to do this.
Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next month.
Sounds good to me. Take care, Lee.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you, Larry. That was terrific. And Lee, as you might know from our schedule, we were planning to do a video now, but I think we're going to go ahead and skip because we've run over our time. So we're going to go ahead and skip to Gigi. Gigi Best, and I think I see Gigi. Let's see if we can see Gigi on screen. We will.
I can't do both. Can you hear me?
There she is. Hi, Gigi.
Hi, how you doing?
Okay. Well, please welcome Gigi Best, who is the founder of the Best Richardson African Diaspora Literature Museum and Bookstore in Tampa, Florida. And Gigi last week was going to join us for our program on Juneteenth. As it turned out, she was unable to join us because she has so many people at her Juneteenth celebration that she just was unable to connect with us. So she's here this week to tell us, the lights are going crazy. She's here this week to tell us about how that went. So I'm going to bring in, I know you have a slide presentation as well. I'm going to bring that in, but in the meantime, just talk to us about how things went.
It was awesome. We had participation. The way we had set up the event, we wanted to make sure that it was historically relevant. So we had a lady her name is Ursula, who portrayed Mary McLeod Bethune, who was not enslaved, but her parents were and her siblings were. We had another lady who talked about Madam Fortune Taylor, who was enslaved here in Tampa and sold the land to the city that's over now by the main library downtown. And they did a Fortune Taylor Bridge. And so the bridge is named after her. We had a gentleman from Nigeria. He spoke about Africa. And we also had, I did one of Langston Hughes, one of my favorite poems called The Negro Mother. And we had live music, and we had some nurses who came to give out shots, Johnson & Johnson. And we probably had about, we probably had about 300 to 350 people there.
Wow.
We were so busy because it was just Skip, I, and Colleen basically running the bookstore. And then I gave 4 museum tours, and the museum tours were so crowded. So it was just a busy day, but it did not rain.
It did not rain.
So yes, so we were happy about that.
Gigi, yes. I know that you have some slides to show us that are about Juneteenth that put it into perspective. And so let me let you go ahead with that. I think we have it in place now. And so you can go ahead with it when you are ready.
Okay. The title of my presentation is Juneteenth, the African Holocaust and the Making of a National Holiday. And there's some people who still don't understand why Juneteenth is celebrated or commemorated. I say commemorated more because it's important for people to know why that particular day is celebrated in many cities. I was talking to Alan T. Allen, and I told him that I didn't know anything about it because I was raised in New Jersey. I didn't know there was such a thing as the Civil War. I didn't know anything about that period. So I want to begin with the first Africans in English North America. And this is a sign, one of the signs that are put up by the city, and it's near the city of Hampton. And it says the first documented Africans in English America arrived in Jamestown in 1619. And I wanted to add that one of the ladies who arrived from Angola was my ninth great grandmother, Margaret Cornish. So on here it says a Dutch man of war captured them from the Spanish who enslaved them, but it was actually an English privateer, which they're called pirates. They were given the right to attack any ship that came from Spain or from the either Spanish or Portuguese. And so when they captured these Africans from Angola, they thought that they were going to get gold and all kind of booty. So what they ended up saying, it was just 20 and odd Africans. And so some were given Spanish names because they were baptized, and many of them, most of them were treated as indentured servants because there was no chattel slavery at that time. And then they were later freed from periods of servitude. One of my great grandfathers spent 29 years of indentureship, whereas my British great grandfather only served 5. So from the beginning of the institution, enslavement involved during the 17th century, and at the Virginia colonists kept extending the length of service for Africans from a fixed term to life. So it was abolished legally in 1865. So one of the pertinent stories about why we celebrate Juneteenth is depicted in the story of the last Black cargo. Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes went down to Mobile, Alabama, and interviewed this gentleman because they heard he was the last enslaved person here in America. And when they went to interview him, you'll see here, his name is Cujo Kazula Lewis. And he was born around 1841, and he died July 17th, 1935. When they went to interview him, it was around 1927. And so he lived to be about 94 or 95. He was a Bantu. That's the current country of Benin. And people sometimes tell people of African descent, well, your people sold the other people. But what happened is they had a very congenial society, and there was another, the Dahomians came in and killed his people and captured them and put them up for sale. Now, the thing that is interesting is the fact that the ship was called the Clotilda. There's a copy of what it would have looked like back there in 1860, and they found it, and this is what it looks like today. So there is a program to help the people that are living there in Africa Town to make a museum. Now, these two gentlemen, if you want to call them that, Timothy Meher, they organized the last transport of enslaved people to the U.S. in 1860. It was an act. It was an illegal endeavor at this time because trafficking of captive Africans was declared an act of piracy, punishable by death by the U.S. Congress. England supposedly emancipated the people that they had in the islands in the Caribbean in 1820. But as we all know, some of them still were in bondage, just like here in America. So a number of the former captives founded Africa Town, which is a community in Mobile. And these gentlemen went to court and were deemed not responsible because, of burning the ship, burning the evidence. But now we know that they really did this, and they did it on a bet. We bet that we can go there and get these people, and they captured 140, but only 110 survived because of the cruelness of the transportation. This is what Africa Town looks like today. And so it's a community dealing with the legacy of toxic waste. And the people, once they were freed, they had no money, they had nowhere to go, and they had to buy the land from the Mears to even build this little town. One of the things that happened a lot at the end of enslavement was the problem with the captives of taking people who didn't have jobs, couldn't get jobs, and make them criminals because they didn't have jobs. It's a catch-22. So this is a Texas prison camp where the formerly enslaved had to work every day. And if you see in the upper left corner, what I'm trying to do with this presentation is many people say, oh, well, that's just Cujo. That's some people, that didn't happen often. You see, the Texas convict is of my great-grandfather, James Grice, who hadn't done anything. He was just imprisoned because he didn't have a job. So the other way they imprisoned people and kept people submissive was by the mental hospital. My grandmother, my mother's mother, died in a mental hospital when she was 9 years old. This is the first mental hospital in North Carolina. It's now called Cherry Hospital, where they put women who were supposed to be mentally incompetent. But back then, if a woman said that her husband was having an affair and he wanted to get rid of her, he just had two people sign and she was put in a home. So I don't know which one of these ladies is my grandmother, but you see down on the left, picking cotton in 1915. What happened is my cousins who lived there told me that the hospital would put women on a truck and men who were in a different hospital and take them out and make them work in the fields, the cotton field and the tobacco field, and they had no choice. The other sad thing that my family endured is my grandmother's certificate is on the right, and she was born in 1905 and did not live very long because after she was put in this hospital, they say she died of aortic insufficiency, which is like a heart attack in a very young woman. And we believe that was due to them giving her electric shock treatment. This is a report, and they called it the Eastern Wayne Insane Asylum. And it says that Cherry Hospital was opened by the state in 1880 for African American citizens with mental illness. And in 1965, it was open to all ethnicities. Another thing that affects me is a lot of times when people talk about enslavement, like I said, they assume people are talking about other people. I have a very rich and varied history. I have Native American parents, ancestors. I have African ancestors. I have ones that were born free, remained free, and I had some that was enslaved. So my second great grandmother, her name was Farabee. And so what happened is when my third great grandfather died, then my third great grandmother divided his property. So you will see there's a lady listed here in lot number 4. Her name is Farabee. There was a gentleman named Jack and a child named Louisa, and they were listed for $2,200. And it was drawn from my second great grandfather, Theophilus Best. On the side here, you will see, and I want you to look at the man to the extreme right. His name is Nathan Best. Oddly enough, that's what my brother's name is. So Nathan Best did a slave narrative. And in that narrative, he says where he was born, who his parents were, who his enslavers were. And I realized that he was related to me. So he was taken as a body servant from North Carolina to fight in the Civil War. During that period of time, he actually was a messenger on a horse, and he got shot off the horse and lost his arm. And he lived to his 90s, but they cut his arm off on the field, and they did not want to give him any pension because they said he went in as a servant. But he had a lot of stories to tell about my European cousin who took him to war and how he was afraid to fight and how he was always trying to go back home and saying that his mother was sick. This picture is actually taken in Mississippi, where he is at what they call the Confederate Soldiers' Home. There were only 3 men of African descent there, and he was one of them. You can't read this real well, but this is out of a book in North Carolina that tells about different families. So it talks about the Best brothers. On the left-hand side, you'll see that is the house of my 5th great grandfather, who was an enslaver. And then on the right, the sad thing about this is the gentleman that's in the upper left-hand corner is a Best. And I'm going to show you how so many of them look alike. And his daughter wrote this piece, and she was saying he was injured in the Civil War, walked with a cane, but that didn't stop him from being head of the Ku Klux Klan. So you're not responsible for who is in your family. So here, Benjamin Best, my 5th great grandfather, served in the Revolutionary War. And so these are some of his descendants. In the upper right is my dad and my grandmom. So my grandmom is a Fuller. So this is the Best line I'm talking about. So down under, you'll see me, and you'll see some cousins, and I and Tom Best have the same features, the same high cheekbones, the same mouth. We look a lot alike. And in the middle at the top is one of my great aunts. And if you look at her, my second great aunt, who was Chapin's sister, you'll see them. the story is the actual facts. And then in the middle and the bottom, that's my grandfather as a young man. So my European grandfather, the one you saw, Theophilus, the third, actually raised Chapin and Polly and gave them 40 acres of land apiece. And so in the very left is my third great grandfather. That was his dissemination of property. And that is my third great grandmother, Nancy Jane Daniel. And in the middle is that aunt that you see in the middle up at the top. These are descendants of Thomas Bess, who he was born in England, Sussex, England, and I've been there. And just to explain why it's so important about commemorating Juneteenth, you'll see people that say, oh, well, I didn't have any enslaved people. I didn't do anything. But this is just a correlation between the Best brothers. These gentlemen are all my cousins. And there's a house now. It's the Benjamin W. Best house that was built in 1850. So I'm sure it was built by enslaved people. And now it is a bed and breakfast. And I was very surprised to see that they do weddings there. And it's $6,700 to have a wedding for 50 people. That is, it's in Snow Hill, North Carolina. Oh, wow. On the left is my great grandfather, Chapin Best. That little cottage was his house. It's still standing. And right under that is my fifth great grandfather's house, which he built this in 1735. Under there is a church that was built in 1898, and the money was, the land was given by my Aunt Polly. So Juneteenth is a national holiday now. And just discussing a few things about enslavement, it's defined as a civil relationship in which one person has absolute power of the life, fortune, and liberty of another. Peonage is what was going on in those labor camps. It's the use of laborers bound in servitude. The Reconstruction Act of 1867 didn't do much. No, I don't know anybody who, or there might have been a few people who got 40 acres and a mule. My grandfather, second great grandfather, actually raised his children. My great grandmother did not. I just learned recently that she married and a man last name Mitchell, and I'm still trying to find out about that. So the other things happened it was denial of land and decent housing, sharecropping and tenant farming. So you worked as a sharecropper, but by the time you got to the end of the month, because you were so far out in the woods working, you had to get your supplies from the person you were sharecropping with. That person, most of the time, would charge you so much that by the time you were supposed to get paid, you would be increasingly going in the hole. And some people had to run away to even get free from that. And the expulsion from lands and towns was very common. We all know about what happened in Tulsa. So when you tried to establish, and even with those strict consequences, would happen that you had no choice over. And a lot of times the police were just hired. People were given badges just because they were there to subjugate the enslaved. And one of the things I learned about just recently was about the redlining in 1950s and 1960s in places like Levittown, where they drew red lines around African neighborhoods, African American neighborhoods, and would not let them move into places like Levittown. And this is the FHA, the Federal, the Homeowners Administration. They were
because it was
guilty.
federal policy. It was
Yes.
federal policy. These kinds of practices.
Yes, it was. And so that is, you know, when you hear people say, oh, they should have just pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. These people did it and these people did it. It was not possible because, you know, you go 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, and then it was legalized. So they had chain gangs and prison farms, as I said. A lot of times people would get false charges and extensive sentences. People could be auctioned to planters, and this is after emancipation. These mass incarcerations, confinement to penitentiary for life, the Jim Crow laws outlawed miscegenation, as they called it, when people were trying to get married from 2 ethnicities. They couldn't vote, they couldn't assemble. They had vagrancy laws. And then, as I mentioned, the the mental confinement, experimentation, and maiming. So you see why it's so important to commemorate the fact that though the Emancipation Proclamation was written in 1863 and people in North Carolina and some other places were able to free themselves by running away, by becoming contraband, running to Hampton, Virginia, where Colonel Butler took them in. But the thing with the what happened in that kept the people enslaved in Texas, they did not even know they were free. They were so deep out in the woods, and even though the enslavers knew it, they deliberately kept them so they could get bring more crops to the market. So,
and that's why it's so important and such a great breakthrough that the observance of Juneteenth has now become a national holiday and has become a national observance to bring attention to the what actually was taking place and going forward. Hopefully that means that things will change. It's taken a long time, but
a long time.
We're moving in the right direction.
Yes, and we're hoping that will that, like you say, a step, and so many more people are recognizing, and you know, people are being educated every day. And so with this thing about, oh, you shouldn't teach this and you shouldn't teach that, just let people not know anything. That is not really a good way to handle. Everybody should know. Everybody should know.
Everybody should know. And the fact that it is now a national observance, I think is very, very important. You know, a few years ago, I think I mentioned to you a few years ago, I'd never heard of Juneteenth.
Me neither.
Neither.
So I think we're definitely moving in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Gigi, thank you so much for your report, and we look forward to. I think maybe next year what we need to do is maybe set up a booth at your event and broadcast from there or something.
Oh, that would be very nice. That would be very nice.
I figure if Lester can go on location, why can't we go on location?
How about it? How about it?
And maybe some of us could even come to Tampa for it, since we can travel.
Yes, that would be very nice. And we had,
absolutely,
yeah, we had people here from the county, from the city, the police, set up a table. So not only did we have vendors, but we had local community active people who were here trying to reach out. And the museum got a lot of business. And I just did a genealogy presentation right before I came on. So I'm looking forward.
Thank you very much, and we look forward to your next report.
Okay.
And in the meantime, we are moving ahead.
Okay.
To
bye.
Bye. See you soon. So we are we have a couple of videos, and I know that still ahead we have Lynn will have a report from the book club, right?
Right.
Absolutely. So, but before we get to that, I want to bring in. We have a couple of video. We're running out of time, but we're just going to run over a little bit. We have Lynn Thompson, who's been looking into LGBT authors, and he has something, a couple of authors to discuss with us. Lynn Harris and Richard Halliburton. I had never heard of Lynn Harris, but of course, Richard Halliburton was a world-renowned traveler, and I had heard of him. So we're going to bring in our video with Lynn Thompson, and then following that, we're going to do a video as well with our gentleman in California. So we'll be coming back to that. And when we come back to that, I'm going to ask you, Lee, if you remember green stamps, and if you
yes.
we'll talk about that in a minute, right after this this video.
Oh, hi, everyone. I'm Lynn Thompson, coming to you live from Chester, South Carolina, and this is the story behind the story. A look at what makes books books, and the tortuous paths they have sometimes led, and the obscurity into which they have sometimes fallen. This month I've been looking at LGBT art, what makes books books, and the tortuous paths they have sometimes led, and the obscurity into which they have sometimes fallen. This month I've been looking at LGBT authors because it's Pride Month. Today I want to talk about two. One is Everett Lynn Harris, who lived from 1955 to 2009. When he was 3 and known as Everett Jeter, his mother married a man called Ben Harris. And the boy got not only his stepfather's surname, but his anger and abuse. Papa Harris thought the boy was a sissy and subscribed to the popular view that beatings would drive it out and toughen him up. After college, Harris took a job selling computers, moved successfully through better paying jobs at IBM, AT&T, and Hewlett-Packard. By 1990, he was successful, well-to-do, drinking heavily, and so miserable he considered suicide. Failing at that, he quit his job and moved to Atlanta. He sat down and wrote a novel about a successful African-American man torn between women's attractions to him and his attraction to other men. He was inspired by a chance encounter 7 years earlier, meeting the author Maya Angelou at a corporate sales meeting, he recalled. She told me I should write something every day, even if it was just one word. Invisible Life was the result. He couldn't find a publisher for it. So he self-published, loaded his trunk with copies, and hit the road around Atlanta. He peddled it to reading clubs, beauty salons, barbershops, and sold 10,000 copies on his own. Most of his central characters were gay or bisexual Black men, and his novels were typically set in the upper echelons of Black society, including sports, churches, and the law. His most dedicated readers were Black women who flocked to his readings across the country by the hundreds, often bringing him flowers and food. This left Harris baffled. If you were African American and you were gay, he said, you kept your mouth shut and you went on and did what everybody else did. You had girlfriends, you lived a life that your parents had dreamed for you. Waiting to pitch his book to an Atlanta bookstore manager, Harris struck up a conversation with a woman who worked there. What you need, she told him, is an agent. She gave him the name of one in New York. The agent liked the book. He sold it to Anchor as a trade paperback. And as author E. Lynn Harris, he became famous virtually overnight. In 2001, he signed a 3-book deal for $8 million. His books married the superficial glamour of jet-setting potboilers with an emotional candor that shed light on a segment of society that had received little attention. Black men on what he, in a brilliant turn of phrase, called the down low. That is, men who are publicly heterosexual but secretly have sex with men. On the down low and the DL remain universally known terms in American discourse to this day. Harris published 10 more books, each one a New York Times bestseller. He became one of the most successful African American writers of his time, and by far the most successful openly gay one. When he died, over 4 million copies of his books were in print. On a 2009 business trip to California, he collapsed on a train, chalked it up to fatigue, and carried on. Several days later, he suffered a heart attack and died in his Los Angeles hotel at the age of 54. His books are harder to find now, but the coinage he invented has become a commonplace in discussion in America, not necessarily that it has changed many people's views, but it's a significant contribution nonetheless. The other writer I want to talk about was born in 1900. Near the height of his fame in 1930, the travel writer and adventurer Richard Halliburton received a singular honor. Vanity Fair put him on a list of celebrities they nominated for oblivion. Bestowing the prize, the magazine called Halliburton successful for making, quote, a glorious racket out of dauntless youth, with tales it called transparently bogus. To be fair, it also admitted that Halliburton's books were marvelously readable, extremely popular, and have made their author a millionaire. Here's an example of his somewhat overheated prose by today's standard. Waking in Barcelona to the sounds of an Algerian band outside his hotel, he wrote, such stirring music was irresistible. I waltzed out of bed, hornpiped to my bath, boleroed into my clothes, fandangoed to breakfast, can-canned out front door, and mazurka'd down the street in search of those mad, mad pipes. Son of a successful Tennessee civil engineer, Richard Halliburton, born in 1900, was a bookish, sickly kid. In his teens, he was packed off to Dr. Kellogg's sanitarium in Battle Creek for the treatment. And by his late teens, he had determined to be the most famous, well-traveled man on earth. After prepping at Lawrenceville, Halliburton edited the Princeton Tiger while studying for his degree. At 19, he told his parents he was visiting friends for the weekend, then signed on with a merchant marine vessel as an ordinary seaman for a tour of the world. The trip made plain to Halliburton that it was now possible to go anywhere. He saw his future as one endless adventure told to an admiring homebound public. At 25, he published his first collection of travel adventures, The Royal Road to Romance. In it, he traveled down the Nile, headed over to India and Thailand, and climbed Mount Fuji in the winter. It was a bestseller and made him $1 million. For the next 15 years, Halliburton published a book every 18 months. He would spend a year on the road writing as he went, both the book and syndicated newspaper columns. Then he barnstormed America on lecture tours, giving as many as 50 lectures a month. His model was the journalist Lowell Thomas, who'd made Lawrence of Arabia famous and himself wealthy with lectures that included movie footage, then a novelty. New Worlds to Conquer in 1929 featured Halliburton's tour of Central and South America, where he swam the Panama Canal. Tools for crossing the canal were assessed based on weight, and since Halliburton swam across, all 5'8" and 140 pounds of him, his toll was just 37 cents. Cheeky as ever, he's registered himself a ship and covered the 51-mile trip in 10 days. Bending the rules became part of his routine. He liked sneaking onto trains without paying the fare and turning indignant comic conductors into comic foils. Denied entry to places, he went anyway, overnighting in the Taj Mahal, sleeping atop the Great Pyramid. He dove twice into the Mayan Well of Death and described the skeletons littering the bottom. Despite the dash and glitter of his persona, Halliburton was a frequently lonely figure, a gay man in an age when his existence was a criminal act. As early as 1926, he wrote of his personal feelings of isolation and a number of over 1,000 letters to his parents without ever explaining why. He invented glamorous liaisons with women in his books, but his relationships were with men. He was a man of the roaring 20s, the endlessly chipper man-boy like Rudy Valley, Scott Fitzgerald, and he commanded his audience with superb theatricality. Susan Sontag, the Mandarin of American high culture, considered Halliburton's books among the most important of her life, recalling that he had, quote, devised for himself a life of being forever young and on the move. My first vision of what I thought had to be the most privileged of lives, that of a writer. Modern travel writer Paul Theroux tips his hat to Halliburton. Even the controversial comic Lenny Bruce was a Halliburton groupie. There was something about him, a raffish yet wholesome Walt Whitman, yawping barbarically while always traveling first class. But his last adventure taunted fate too hard. He conceived the notion of sailing the Pacific in a Chinese junk. It was pure Terry and the Pirates and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom fantasy. He launched the project in 1936. 1,000 men wrote to join the crew. He hired a Chinese shipbuilder to construct the vessel just in time for the Japanese invasions. The project ran wildly over budget, and the Japanese proved impervious to the Halliburton's charms. It took him 2 years to complete and obtain the release of the vessel. He and his crew, including his partner Paul Mooney, left Hong Kong in early 1939. By March 1st, they were west of Midway, radioing a liner about heavy weather. That was the last anyone ever heard. Ironically, the Navy delayed a search for a month, thinking the disappearance a publicity stunt. The curse of being a travel writer is that there's rarely a following for what one has already done. It is the next adventure that feeds the beast. With Halliburton gone, a Tennessee court declared him dead in September of 1939, and a new world war on, his name vanished from sight and largely from memory. Halliburton did leave two lasting monuments. In 1962, his parents built a bell tower at Tennessee's Rhodes College, for which he had never had any connection whatever. But they liked the college and left his papers to it. For its part, Rhodes was happy to assist in their sanitizing and respectifying his life. Not until a few years ago did the biographer skip the whitewash pail and present Halliburton in full. The other came in 1936, landbound for a while, planning the Pacific voyage. Halliburton and Mooney commissioned an up-and-coming architect to design a house for them on a clifftop lot at Laguna Beach, California. Hangover House, named for both its location and its parties, rose from a huge concrete retaining wall 400 feet above a canyon, and Levy hoped embodied Halliburton's endless quest for new horizons. Built of steel, concrete, and block and plate glass, it was a pioneering international-style home on the West Coast that so dazzled an unknown writer called Ayn Rand so completely, she included the memories of a visit to it in creating Howard Roark's famous house in Atlas Shrugged.
And thank you, Lynn, for that report. And now, Lee, it's us.
Here we are.
We are here. We are here, and we are at the. We are really at the end of our program and end of our time. We have not gotten to things found in books. We will publish that on the on the Rare Book Cafe page following this program. But in order to move to in close to on time,
do you want to save mine till next week?
Well, we don't want it to grow stale. But,
I don't think it will. This week's is on the writers that we have had visit book club over the years.
Oh, okay.
And I have a few slides of their visits as well.
Oh, good.
So it might be better to save it when we're not so rushed.
Yes, I think that would be. And
that's okay with me. Well, I've been trying to get pictures together, and I have contacted everyone in the book club, plus some of the writers who visited us, and I'm still hoping to come up with a few more pictures. So
you still have some to do. Okay.
So
well,
yeah, so I could add things to it if I had another week to do it.
All right. Well, then in that case,
that's fine.
Your wish is granted, and
okay.
I'm going to pop in our closing credits here.
Okay.
And we are finished. And thank you so much, Lee, for being here. And we of course we.
I apologize to any book club members who've been sitting around waiting for me.
Oh no.
I don't know that there were any, but they tend to catch it later on, in the week. But yeah, I might be able to come up with a couple of more pictures to let our viewers know, kind of what we look like and who we are.
Well, good. I think that's an excellent idea. I want to say as we close here that Mary Kay Watson is gone until August. Ed Markowitz will be on the road next week, and he's going to New England. And we hope that he's going to be on with us in New England. We're going to see how that works, but I think he's going to stop in to see Richard Morey, who just got through doing the first in-person book fair in the nation. So I think he's going to drop in there. Next week we have Eddie Nix from Driftless Books and Music in Viroqua, Wisconsin, and of course we'll have Lynn Thompson and David Hess, and you'll be back with us.
I'll be back. Yes.
All right. So that's all the time we have. We've run over just a little bit, but not too badly. So we'll push the button on the credits and say see you until next week.